As you all probably know, I'm a big fan of Thomas and Friends. But what if I told you that this show had a sister show? What if I told you that this show had the same music composers that work on Thomas? What if I told you that this show was planned to be successful but fail after its first season? Of course, I'm talking about... What the hell is Tugs? Well, Tugs is, of course, the short-lived sister show of Thomas and Friends. Like few of you out there, I had no idea about this show's existence due to its obscurity until 2001. That year, a YouTuber named The Unlucky Dog made a video about Tugs. And that's where my curiosity was caught. And I was like, Tugs? Well, never heard about this. I should take it a go. I was like, yeah, I should definitely watch it because, hey, that looks very interesting. And yeah, I wasn't gonna waste my time, so I click on it. And after watching his retrospective video, I was like, I have no idea. Yep. To me, it was a very interesting experience. And I was like, you know what? I should really learn more about this show. And a few years later, in 2024, I decided, you know what? It's time for me to make my own retrospective video. And that's what I did. So, come join me as we take a look at one of the most beautiful but obscure kid shows I have ever seen. But before we talk about this show, let's go over its history. Tugs was created by Thomas director David Minton and producer Robert D. Cardona. After 2 successful seasons of Thomas, the duo decided to create their own show. After floating ideas around cars or airplanes, their main inspiration came around a fleet of tugboats. So Minton and Cardona traveled through several ports around America to get their inspiration for the show. And so, the show was filmed at the same studio as Thomas, that being at Shepperton Studio in the UK. The show was meant to have all 13 episodes run for 30 minutes. However, the team decided that kids' attention will not stick that long, so they shaved down the episodes to 20 minutes. But this was also a bit too long, so they shaved them down to at least 15 minutes for TV broadcasts. After the success of season 1, the show was sadly canceled after the production studio, Clearwater Features, filed for bankruptcy on New Year's Eve 1990. And that, my friends, was the end of the production history of Tugs. Except it wasn't, because 4 years later, after the cancellation of Tugs, Canadian producer Andrew Catron, I believe I said that right, would soon join forces with Robert D. Cardona and do a new project from scratch all over again. And the results were a different show called Theater Tugboat that shares a similar, well, the same concept as Tugs. But unlike Tugs, the show was a bit more lighthearted and not as dark as that show. Thank God. And yeah, guys, that was a complete history of Tugs. And yeah, it was pretty wild and a bit unfortunate. But I guess I can see why this show never reached this height, because no one actually knows who this show was about. No one could know what was their intended audience. Of course, it was basically preteens, older kids. But I don't know. The concept of talking vehicles is something that's a bit more, connected usually towards little kids. So I'm pretty sure why preteens never got around at watching this. And I'm pretty sure little kids will be traumatized by the show due to it being very dark. And I can see why, it didn't reach the height as Thomas and Friends did, because it was a bit too dark for younger kids and not as appealing for, older kids. And yeah, it's pretty unfortunate that Tugs ended after season 1, because most of us would really adore seeing more of the show. I know I would. And yeah, so many lost concepts that I don't know if you want to call this lost media, but since I discovered that they exist, scripts of episodes, if not 7 season worth of content that was, never made because the show was, canceled after season 1. So, would you consider that lost media? I personally would. So, with that out of the way, now let's focus on the characters themselves. To start with all the characters, I think it's best we just talk about the 2 main fleets of tugboats. So you got the Star Fleets and their rivals, the Zero Fleet, or Zextags. I think it's obvious we start talking about the Star Fleet first. Let's start with the main character of the show, 10 Cents. Now, 10 Cents is one of the youngest of the Starfleet. He's young, a boy's age, and by the way, he's actually voiced by a teenage boy. He can be a bit of a hothead sometimes, and he's often the firstman, the one who keeps the other tugs in line when they get a little bit rowdy sometimes. Something similar to that of season 5 Thomas. He's often very brave, loyal to his captain, and of course, a very good member of the team. That's why 10 Cent is one of my favorite characters, and I really love them. Next, it's Sunshine, who is 10 Cent's little sidekick. Sunshine is the smallest of the fleet, and he actually came from upriver, and soon joined the Starfleet in the first episode. Now, Sunshine is a bit of an interesting character, and yeah, he's often together with Sunshine, and both of them are, of course, the 2 main characters of the show, and yeah, a bit of a pretty good guy. I like Sunshine, who loves Sunshine, we all love Sunshine. Next is, of course, everyone's favorite, Top Hat. Now, Top Hat is, of course, a fan favorite character. He's very snooty, upper class type, and yeah. Top Hat is one of the most interesting characters, having one of the most funnest props I ever seen, and having the ability to move his cap up and down, it's just so fun to enjoy watching. And of course, how can I talk about Top Hat without at least mentioning his Spotlight episode High Tide, where Top Hat pushes the barge Lord Stinker to stop a runaway train that's I was about to hit. And oh my god, such an amazing episode. I really recommend watch this episode. It's a really fun one. And just because, well, it's Top Hat. This guy is a star Tug, and this episode show us why. I really recommend watching this one. It is a good one. Next, it's OJ, the oldest Tug of the fleet. Now, OJ is a very interesting character because this guy is the equivalent of Edward from Thomas and Friend, who is very wise, intelligent, and often is the only one where the smaller Tugs, Sunshine and Tencent, come to for advice. OJ, which stands for Old Jones, is your typical wise old man character. As mentioned by Captain Stark, he's the last of the pedal steam Tugs still around in Big City Port, which means that OJ has been around for a long time ago. He's also pretty cool, and despite being the old man of the Starfleet, he's often the one who's always involved in the most disasters. An old tugboat he may be, but he has a heart of gold, just like Edward from Thomas and Friends. Next, we got Warrior. A big, strong Tug, but sometimes not so smart. Despite being the idiot of the group, he's often comes with simple solution to help solve dire problems, like stopping Izzy the Trent steamer from sinking, putting out the munitions fire, or saving up Tug from loose logs, etc. And that's why me and other fans just really liked him. He's just that lovable. Big Mac is the one who often works with Warrior. This guy, unlike Warrior, he's very much the type that doesn't stand for jokes. He's the serious one of the fleet, who doesn't stand for jokes or games when there's work to do. One of the funniest dynamics in the show is Big Mac's, well, let's just say, he's not much of a big fan of the comical Billy Shoeback, who he obviously has a big disdain for. Besides that, Big Mac can be a natural leader type. He takes in charge of the ocean liners when Hercules isn't around. Oh yeah, and speaking of, the next one is Hercules, the fleet's ocean-going Tug, which means he assists with jobs that take place in the sea, like towing in ocean liners or making deliveries to other ports. I like this character with his cool, slow voice that not even the Zeg Stack would want to mess with.
Boys, very nice. That's the third crime to report. Captain Zero will tell the Navy.
Move it, Zoran, old boy.
Only a game, you understand, Hercules?
I know all about your game, Zoran. Beat it, and take your driftwood with you.
Hercules is the smartest Tug of the fleet. I mean, yeah, you got OJ who's wise and book smart, but Hercules is more like street smart. I bet that if he was involved with all the problems and all the shenanigans that happens in the port, I bet all of the problems would be solved very, very fast. Hercules doesn't appear that much in the show, but he's a very interesting character, at least for me. I'm sure a lot of you will want to be as cool as this guy. You have to be as cool to call anyone darling or sweetheart and still come out as very masculine.
Finished here, old darling. Moving out.
And you don't know to let check things out.
Check all you like, sweetheart. I'm needed elsewhere.
You're under Navy jurisdiction. Obey orders and wait late meet my inspection.
I am under jurisdiction. Captain Stars, a little wake washer like you, doesn't tell me what to do.
What?
There's also Krampus, the midget submarine that soon becomes the fleet's 8th member, and even before joining the Starfleet, he was a very useful ally for them. Krampus used to work for the Navy, until the Navy decided to retire him and tried to blow him up. Yes, Krampus in one episode was almost got himself killed. Thankfully, he got rescued by the Starfleet, and Captain Star purchased him from the Navy. He usually spent most of his time under the water, so every time he comes up, he always spits water to anyone. And I mean anyone. A weird guy he may be, but he's a really useful submarine. And those were the heroes of the fleet. Now oh! Was that alert? I missed one else. Who did I miss? Oh! Oh, hold on, folks. We forgot one more. And that would be, of course, their captain, Captain Star, who's also a narrator of the show. We never see Captain Star on screen or any other human character, since, you know, he only appears as a microphone in his office. But that's one of the good things of this show, because the focus of this show was not on the people, but on the harbor itself. And that was one of the unique and clever things that this show ever did. The show basically takes place in the past as a present-day Captain Star tells us about his younger day as a tugboat captain. Alright, so those were the heroes of the show. Now we can move on to the antagonist. The opposing team of the show is run by Captain Zero and his Zagstags. Oh yeah, in the UK, people spells Z as Z. Captain Zero is one hell of a shady dude. And I actually have the feeling that he was or is still involved with the Mafia. Like Captain Star, we don't see Zero on screen, only see him talking through his megaphone. Zero's first tug was Zoran, the show's main antagonist. Now Zoran is one complex and scheming character, in a similar way to Diesel from Thomas and Friends or Megatron from Transformers, who often leads his fleet to get whatever he wants, no matter the cost. Next up, we got Zebedee, who's a gentle, introverted giant with a tough guy appearance, but sensitive on the inside. Then we got Zip and Zug, who are the young ones of the fleet, as well as being two very clunky idiots. And finally, there's Zack, who is the least we see in the show, and also the more mafia of the group. He's all tug though, as he's pretty crippled by his old faulty engine. Beside the two main tugboat fleets, there's also a lot of other secondary characters in the show, like Boomer, Lily the Lightship, Sea Rogue, Burke and Blair, Blue Nose, the old Strand Steamer, Johnny Cuba, the rail barges, Eddie and Frank, Billy Shoepack, Old Rusty, and Izzy. No, not that one. Oh yeah, that one. Izzy Gomez, who is
Oh, I sit around waiting for nobody to tell me that.
Let's just say a very positive racist stereotype for Mexicans. Seriously, who even allowed this? But anyway, now that we cover all the characters, let's move on to Chapter 3, the writing. Alright, now this part of the video is going to be very brief because Tugs only ran for only 13 episodes, so there's not much to talk about the writing, so I'm going to keep it briefed. Alright, now the writing on this show is absolutely phenomenal. Pretty good. I like the narration, the atmosphere. It feels so good. The writing is just as good as the one seen in classic Thomas and Friends. It's just that good. And the narration, oh my god, is the narration so damn good.
Night came down fast. Dock lights helped Big Mickey transfer explosives to the naval tramper Krakatoa. The Z-stacks were moored off. All were shot at their dangerous loads except Zoran.
His performance is so wonderful that it fits perfect on the atmosphere in Tugs. I don't think the show would look that good if they used someone else to do the narration. And that's why I really appreciate Tugs. The writing, narration, fantastic. I really appreciate it. Now, even though the writing of the show is pretty good, I still wish the writing could have been a lot better if the show ran with its original 30-minute cuts for all the episodes. But it got cut out to at least 20 to 50, and yeah, we all know what happens there. So yeah, that's pretty much it for the writing. Now let's move on to Chapter 4, the world building. Now, the world building is just as good as the writing. One of the most clever things about this show is that it focused more on the hardware itself than the people. Now, the humans do exist in Tugs, and they have a presence there. Sure, humans are never seen on camera, but they do very much exist. So, every time we see a megaphone stick out of a boat, a train, or in the cranes, literally all the machines that have megaphones, just remember, they're all controlled by people. And every time you see a faceless character with a phone, with a megaphone, oh god. Anyway, so anytime you see a character, a faceless character with a megaphone talking, just remember there is a human speaking through that megaphone. Just like Captain Zero and Captain Star, who are human. Both of them are human, and they only speak through a megaphone right out of their offices because the show doesn't focus on showing, you know, the show does not focus on showing on humans on camera because, as I said, the focus is on the harbor itself, and that's actually pretty clever. I appreciate it. And despite what people say about Tugs and Thomas being in the same world, well, I'm gonna tell you guys all a fact. Well, technically, but Thomas and Tugs are not set in the same universe. Sure, they're made by the same people, and filmed in the same studio, but they're not set in the same universe. First up, the faces on the characters in Tugs are flesh color, and in Thomas, they're gray, so that isn't very consistent. Number 2. All the trains that we see in this show, in Tugs specifically, they don't have faces. Because unlike in Thomas and Friends where technically all the engines have faces, they in here, in Tugs, they don't have faces. So none of the engines are alive. So they're just non-sentient trains. And number 3, the Big Mickey crane that we see in Thomas is not the same as the one we see on Tugs. They both share the name and they look alike, but they're not the same. Besides, the Big Mickey crane in Tugs, it quote unquote dies. I'm saying quote unquote because, as I said, the Big Mickey crane is not a sentient character. It's a non-sentient crane with no face who happens to have a guy speaking through a megaphone. Yeah, to those that say that Big Mickey is quote-unquote alive, well, he isn't. He's a regular, non-sentient crane with a guy speaking through a megaphone. As I said, humans in Tugs do exist. We just don't see them on camera. That's it. Now, when it comes to places outside Big City Port, well, there's only one place that we do see that takes place outside of Big City Port, and that would be, of course, Upriver. Upriver is the other place where the Tugs go and to do their deliveries. It's been mentioned and we've been seeing it a couple of times in the show. And due to be clear, for the second season, they were planning to keep that season solely on the Upriver location because it was much more easier to film and to do all the shots much better. But, as I said at the start, the show filed for bankruptcy in 1990 and the show was immediately cancelled. And yeah, that is why we don't see any more world building. Because I bet for season 2 onward, we would have definitely see some much better world building for the show, new locations, new characters, and so many places that the show could have had. But sadly, it was never meant to be. That's a shame. Alright. Now that we gone through all the world building and all the stuff of Upriver and Big City, now let's move on to the final 2 chapters with the marketing and merchandising. Alright, now this is another part where it's gonna be very brief since there wasn't that much when it comes to merchandise and marketing, but I'll talk about the best I can to what I got back then. So, when it comes to Tugs merchandise, there are a few which it's both by Japanese and American. Let's start with the American marketing. So, here in America, the only Tugs related merchandise we got were a few Ertl diecast models. Yep. the same Ertl line that worked on Thomas' Friends, as well as making toy trucks. Well, when it comes to the Ertl line, the more common ones were Sunshine and 10 Cents. Now, there were a few models of Top Hat and Warrior, I think, but those are pretty rare and I couldn't find any images of those. You also got some magazine stories and annual books. There might be a few other merchandise out there that I just couldn't know, but hey, they're either lost or I couldn't find any sources about them. So let's just move on to the Japanese market. Now, the marketing for Tugs back then was handled by Takara Tomy. Yep, that Takara Tomy. Now, they produce a line that's a bit similar to the Playrail line, but instead about tugboats. They consist of plastic playsets of Sunshine, 10 Cents. We also got a few ones of Top Hat and Lord Stinker, and one that I think also had Zoran. And that's it. Those were the only characters who received toys in that Japanese market. Look, I wish I can go more with this, but it's Tugs. It wasn't that much, so let's just move on to the next section. But before we finish the video with the conclusion, let me tell you guys about one more thing that happened here in America before the show got, canceled. And it's a little obscure show called Salty's Lighthouse. Now, Salty's Lighthouse was an American children's show that aired during the late 90s. Now, note it, I do not know crap about this show, alright? So, I'm just gonna make this brief and I'm just going to talk about some of the main stuff that happens between the show and Tugs. Alright, now, after the end of Tugs, they decided to bring the show to America, and they sliced up or stretched out episodes from Tugs and made them as quote-unquote new episodes? I guess that's what they did. And let's just say that they basically turned Tugs into, well, a bit of a weird shitpost. And I am not exaggerating.
There's liners and barges and garbage to tow. Gonna blow the old horn, just like so. Tugs are a-working, they never go slow. Give the boat a minute and blow, man, blow.
Overall, Salty's Lighthouse was not that good. Let's all be real, it wasn't that good, because what they did with the Tugs footage was just bad and eyebrow-raising. So I think it's best we just forget about the Salty's Lighthouse crap and move on. In conclusion, Tugs is pretty good. It's a pretty good, fantastic show. While, yes, it is a bit darker than Thomas, but that's one of the good things of the show. It didn't treat children like morons, because like Thomas and Friends, it didn't treat the target audience as, idiots. It actually gave the kids some intelligence. Not to mention, this show was meant to be made for older kids, despite the fact that they're talking vehicles and something that isn't so associated with older kids. But hey. Now, it's such a shame that that Tugs ended for, it ended after its first season, but I'm gonna have to say that I kinda don't mind for it to end in season 1, because due to the abomination that Thomas and Friends has become nowadays, I'm pretty glad that Tugs didn't get that treatment, because that would be just horrible. Now, Tugs isn't for anyone. I can agree that, because parents don't want to have their little kids watch this dark show, and older kids will not care about that. But in the end, Tugs came in a place with heart, soul, and passion, and I can really appreciate that. Whew. Well, that was quite right there. And I think it's time to end this retrospective. And until the next team that I review, which the next review that I'm going to do that isn't going to be about a toy or anything, will be on Transformers 1. So stay tuned. And remember, guys, like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Share this video to any friend that might be interested. Until next time, this has been Decepticon Jerry, signing off. Take care, guys.